저는 토라 포션을 12년째 이제 매일 성도들과 함께 새벽 예배에서 이렇게 나누면서 그 은혜의 자양분을 말씀의 어떤 깊숙한 곳에서 그렇게 끌어올리는 그런 기쁨들을 누릴 수가 있었습니다. 교회가 잘 버티고 또 성장할 수 있는 데에 굉장히 뿌리와 같은 역할을 한 것 같습니다. 토라 포션의 그 특징은 이게 지금 나의 삶과 그대로 연결되어 있다. 여기에 이런 의미가 있고 또 여기에 이런 부르심이 있고 지금 우리 삶과 또 우리 자녀들의 앞날과 연결되어 있다라고 하는 것을 이렇게 깨달으시면서 그 관점이 변화되는 것, 그러니까 일종의 세계관을 바꾸는 약이라고 할까요? 완전히 새로운 변화가 삶에서 일어난다라고. 절기나 또 계절이나 지금 이 시기에 주님께서 우리 가운데 이 말씀을 주시고 계시는구나, 몰랐던 그런 부분들, 또 전에는 감추어져 있던 그 말씀의 어떤 보석들을 찾는 그런 기쁨들을 말씀이 실제가 되고 말씀에서 우리가 나오고 우리 말씀으로 돌아가고 그런 어떤 연결들이 있는 것 같아서 재밌기도 하고 감사한 마음입니다.
Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, war in Gaza erupts again as the ceasefire ends. The U.S. urges restraint, and Prime Minister Netanyahu pledges to destroy Hamas. Warnings from a reservist fresh from the front lines about the threat of Hamas extending to the West. And marking November 29, 1947, the moment when the world established the Jewish state. Plus, reports of medical miracles from an ER doctor treating Israeli soldiers. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Early Friday morning, the war began again after Israel accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire. The fighting now puts the release of hostages on hold. Early Friday morning, the IDF resumed bombing in Gaza City after it announced Hamas began firing rockets into southern Israel, breaking the 7-day ceasefire. During that week, more than 100 hostages were freed from Gaza. On Thursday, Hamas released 10 more Israeli hostages. Israel wanted to see all women and children set free. But as the fighting begins again, the negotiations are on hold, and the fate of the nearly 140 hostages still in captivity is uncertain. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken left Friday morning after a day of meetings with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Blinken Israel's goals for the war have not changed.
I told him, this is the same Hamas. This is the same Hamas that carried out the terrible massacre on October 7th. The same Hamas that tries to murder us everywhere. I told him, we swore, and I swore, to eliminate Hamas. Nothing will stop us. We will continue this war until we achieve the 3 goals: to release all our abductees, to eliminate Hamas completely, and to ensure that Gaza will never again face such a threat.
Blinken repeated the administration message that there should be less civilian deaths and displacement in operations in southern Gaza. And Israel's Channel 12 is reporting Blinken gave Israel weeks to finish the job of destroying Hamas. Meanwhile, Palestinians in the West Bank celebrated the release of more than 200 prisoners during the ceasefire. Most of those set free were convicted of terrorism, including attempted murder, stabbings, and bombings. Palestinian Media Watch announced the Palestinian Authority will be paying thousands of shekels to a number of these convicted terrorists. The PA has a long history of glorifying terrorists and martyrs by naming schools and public places after terrorists like Dulal Mughrabi, convicted of one of the worst terror attacks in Israel's history, and the infamous refrigerator bomber. He filled a refrigerator with explosives that killed 15 people and was called a Palestinian symbol. Support for the PA's rival Hamas has increased substantially because of the war in Gaza. As a result, the PA has praised what Hamas did on October 7th. Despite this, U.S. Secretary Blinken sees the PA as a peace partner after the war.
We've said, and indeed I had an opportunity to discuss today with President Abbas, the need for reform, the need to revitalize, to revamp the Palestinian Authority so that it can most effectively meet the aspirations of the Palestinian people and deliver for them.
One story not getting a lot of play since the beginning of Israel's war with Hamas is about IDF casualties, or lack of casualties. While reporting from Barzilai Hospital near the Gaza border, CBN war correspondent Chuck Holton heard amazing things from an ER doctor. She's practiced medicine in urban ERs before in the U.S., but has never seen anything like what she's seeing now.
They're very much miracles what I'm seeing here. It's literally like things are going out of their way to miss integral organs. People, the injuries I'm seeing here, had I seen them in the Bronx, would have been devastating, life-ending, debilitating injuries. Here, I don't know whether it's someone watching over them or whether it's just the strength of these people. Every single one of them, they come here, they're all injured. The first thing they do is ask when they can go back, because it's really the strength that you're seeing here. And miracle of miracles, we're just seeing incredible feats of strength and just someone's watching over us from above.
Coming up, how the threat facing Israel is heading for the rest of the world next. Hananya Naftali, a well-known voice on social media, has just returned from IDF service on the front lines. He came by our studio the other day and gave us an update. Hananya Naftali, great to see you again. The last time we saw you, or since the last time we saw you, you've been in Gaza. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Well, myself, just as the vast majority of young men in Israel are right now fighting or on reserve duty to some extent, because we understand that this is an existential war. October 7, it's the date where the highest number of Jews were murdered since the Holocaust. Just let it sink in. So it's a war that's not just defending our borders when we were there. It's literally defending our homes, our wives, our children, because we saw on October 7 that these Hamas terrorists, they ran straight to the houses to kidnap people, to murder people. So that's that's the situation in Israel right now. Even though we are in a ceasefire, we are alert to see and to be ready for anything.
Can you expound a little bit on that, about this existential threat to Israel? I mean, this is Israel's fighting for its survival.
Precisely. But I think that what a lot of people don't understand is that it's not just Israel's fight. It's not just this fight across the ocean in the Middle East. It's a fight that is the West's fight. We already seeing what's happening in Europe. People that came under the disguise of refugees are right now taking over major cities in Europe with massive protests in support of Hamas. And we are now also seeing this in the United States of America. And I think that this should concern our American friends, because these people side with Hamas, a radical Islamist group that believes in political terrorism. They basically say, think like me or die. And so what Israel is doing right now, fighting Hamas, is doing a favor to the world by fighting this radical Islamist group. It's a war between good and evil. We're about to celebrate Hanukkah in Israel, the holiday of lights, and it's a war between light and darkness. So I would challenge our friends and say, which side are you on? The side of light or the side of darkness?
You were like there in Gaza, many on the front lines in the military battle, but there's also an information battle. For example, some people have dismissed what happened on October 7th, minimized it, on social media. Talk about the information war that you're part of and that Israel is engaged in right now.
It's really heartbreaking, because as an Israeli, I was born and raised here. I was never taught or raised to hate my neighbors. I was raised by this Bible verse, love thy neighbor. I was never taught to fight my neighbors. Even when I joined the Israel Defense Forces to the Armored Corps and later became a combat medic, it feels like the mainstream media portrays us, the reserve duty soldiers and on-duty soldiers, that we enjoy being there on the front line, that we enjoy waging war. We would much rather be with our families, stay at home, work. But this is the reality right now in Israel, and there is a war on information. Unfortunately, social media is a center for a lot of fake news and disinformation. But you know, that's in the good case scenario. The worst case scenario is that people straight up support Hamas. After everything that we have seen, the burnt corpses. I don't know if people know this, but in Israel, there are going to be funerals where bodies are going to be buried together with cars because they weren't able to separate the bodies from the car. I visited Kibbutz Be'eri in southern Israel, one of the kibbutzes that was badly hit by this Hamas invasion. I entered the house of Vivian Silver. They found her. They identified her by the ashes of her body. And she was a big peace activist for coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. But I have to say, we Israelis will believe in peace. We never want war. We want peace. But you can't make peace with people that chant death to Israel.
Last question, Hanania. We were yesterday at the Knesset. There was a prayer meeting. Jews and Christians gathered together to pray. In this battle of information and the military battle, how important is prayer?
So important. It was a very symbolic moment that in the Knesset, in Jerusalem, the Parliament of Israel, the capital of Israel, there were people gathered to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for the victory of Israel. Because the victory of Israel is the victory of our friends as well, and the victory of God, because God stands with Israel and He does not neglect and forget His people. So I think that it was so symbolic, and I would encourage people to keep praying for Israel. Because when I was inside the Gaza Strip now, but also in 2014 during the Protective Edge operation, I felt those prayers. I believe that those prayers are saving soldiers in real time. So please don't forget to pray.
Hanania Naftali, great to be with you. And we'll be praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Thank you.
An important Israeli anniversary happened this week, November 29th. It's when the United Nations voted to allow the establishment of the Jewish state in the Holy Land in 1947. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Saul brings a report about this significant moment in Israel's history.
Those who are in favor will say yes. Those who are against will say no.
They called it the Partition Plan. UN Resolution 181 called for the establishment of a Jewish state and an Arab state in British-controlled Palestine.
It represented the acknowledgement of the international community of the right of the Jewish people to establish a state. Also the right of the Arab people to establish a state in Palestine.
The Partition Plan was so significant to the Jewish people that cities throughout Israel have named streets after the date. Kaf Tet B'November, the 29th of November Street, like this one here in Jerusalem. The plan set aside land in the Galilee, along the Mediterranean, and the Negev Desert for the Jewish people. The Arabs received all of biblical Judea and Samaria, later known as the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and other small portions. Perhaps the most controversial part of the plan was that an international body would control Jerusalem. Still, the Jewish people accepted the plan.
The Israelis didn't like it because it didn't give them Jerusalem, and it didn't give them Eilat and all the southern Negev. But they accepted it because, okay, this was the best we can get.
Arabs, however, gave it a thumbs down.
They not just rejected it, but they waged a war not just against the state of Israel, but against the UN resolution.
Israeli Ambassador Alan Baker told CBN News, it's ironic that today Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas uses the resolution to call for his people's right to a Palestinian state.
There was no such thing as a Palestinian people. Then the Palestinians were the Jews living in Palestine. And so he claims that Resolution 181 is their Magna Carta for establishing a Palestinian state because it guaranteed a Palestinian state and a Jewish state. And he's misleading the international community. And of course, they rejected it.
Benjamin Netanyahu said the most important thing for Israelis is remembering to connect with their past.
The first need for the next 100 years is to remember the 4,000 previous ones. That is the first thing that will ensure the future of the Jewish nation in the land of Israel and the state of Israel.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Up next, a warning from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer about the dangers of growing anti-Semitism. A five-alarm fire. That's how Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer describes the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism in America since the October 7th attack. Senator Schumer is the highest-ranking Jewish official in American history. He spoke from the Senate floor this week about the harsh rhetoric against Israel and the Jewish people. Such talk is also heard inside the walls of Congress. CBN Washington correspondent Jenna Browder reports.
I am speaking up to issue a warning informed by lessons of history too often forgotten. No matter what our beliefs, no matter where we stand on the war in Gaza, all of us must condemn anti-Semitism with full-throated clarity wherever we see it before it metastasizes into something even worse.
Majority Leader Schumer warned against blaming Jews for Israeli policy and cautioned not to allow criticism of government to turn into something much darker.
Some of the most extreme rhetoric against Israel has emboldened anti-Semites who are attacking Jewish people simply because they are Jewish.
Schumer said younger Americans especially seem to be jumping to support a cause and message they don't understand.
I believe there are plenty of people who chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, not because they hate Jewish people, but because they support a better future for Palestinians. But there is no question that Hamas and other terrorist organizations have used this slogan to represent their intention to eliminate Jewish people, not only from Israel, but from every corner of the earth.
The Majority Leader's address comes as a growing number of government officials and federal workers are criticizing President Biden's support of Israel and its war on Hamas.
We are congressional staffers on Capitol Hill, and we are no longer comfortable being silent.
More than 100 congressional staffers recently staged a walkout, and hundreds of federal political appointees and staffers signed a letter demanding President Biden pursue an Israeli ceasefire and take immediate action to end Palestinian casualties. In another instance, a top CIA official posted a pro-Palestinian image to her Facebook page. A public political statement former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says is unacceptable.
I'm struggling for words because it is so far out of bounds, right? It is so disconnected from the fundamental role that they have.
Over in the House, a vote Tuesday on legislation reaffirming Israel's right to exist and condemning Hamas did not receive unanimous support. Representative Cori Bush, a Democrat from Missouri, refused to vote for either measure, and Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan voted present for the resolution, which centered on Israel's existence. Jenna Browder, CBN News, Washington.
Former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann came to Israel this week to see firsthand the awful devastation Hamas brought October 7th to Be'eri, a kibbutz where she lived during the summer of 1974.
I came here the day after I graduated from high school. I'd never been to Israel. It was my first time to come to Israel. And I lived and worked here at Kibbutz Be'eri. There were 17 Christian teenagers, a part of Young Life. It was a ministry, high school ministry. And we came here with 3 or 4 adult counselors, and we were here for the summer. We went around Israel, and then we lived and worked here at Kibbutz Be'eri. There's a lot of memories here because I was a young believer when I came here, and we learned so much when we were here. But this is the beginning of Israel. It's one of the kibbutzes that was the very beginning from 1947. And so when October 7th happened, it felt like home to me, and that part of my home was gone too. Even though I was only here for that summer, it still broke my heart. I feel privileged to be able to be here today, but what is certain is that the people who lost homes, over 200 people lost their homes. This is a devastation that you'd only see in Nazi Germany and Dresden. I mean, you wouldn't see anything like this. This is a battlefield that we're looking at.
Up next, fleeing for their lives on October 7th, how CBN Israel is standing with evacuee families in the aftermath. The fallout continues for families that escaped the massacre on October 7th. Thousands are still displaced and trying to put their lives back together. Take a look at how CBN Israel is offering support and practical help.
We have been in this hotel for the second week now. Before this, we were in different hotel for another 2 weeks. It is not easy. I have a little child. She is 2 years old.
Like many Israelis living along the border to Gaza, Anastasia and her family are accustomed to rocket alerts. But she quickly realized the attack of October 7th was different.
We woke up at 6:30 because they started throwing rockets at us. We said they will bombard for 2 to 3 days, as always. And we started with sirens and we ran into the bomb shelter with our family. After a few minutes, we go out. And we already see that they bombed the parking lot 200 meters from us. All the cars there are just on fire. Then videos started to appear. And we started to realize that something was already wrong. That this is not just a bombshell, it was horrible because stories started coming in on Facebook News.
When the initial attacks were over, Anastasia's community leaders checked on people.
It was silence. The whole city, like dead. We had an ambulance roaming the neighborhood. It would stop near houses, probably telling people that someone from their family was kidnapped or killed.
CBN Israel was working with Anastasia's family before the October 7th attacks, so we reached out to her to make sure they were okay and to provide assistance, counseling, and much-needed housing.
They helped my mom a lot. CBN is always ready to help and will answer any question, and no matter what time.
Anastasia and her family are now safe in a hotel thanks to support from donors like you.
They are distributing coupons here. This greatly helps families who will go now. And will be able to spend money on food or on something they lack.
CBN Israel is making a difference here and standing alongside many families like Anastasia's during these difficult times.
The group of people that came who believe in God, they have done so much good for us. Really, we are so grateful. This is completely impossible to understand. Where does so much kindness come from? And the donations for others? For people they don't even know. All you want to do is help. We are very grateful. It is just wow. We are together. We are alive. There is something to thank God for.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. You can access our daily war updates on Facebook and YouTube. Today, we'd like to share with you the Jewish prayer for the state of Israel. Our Father in heaven, Rock and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, the first flowering of our redemption. Shield it under the wings of your loving kindness. Envelop it in your peace, and bestow your light and truth upon its leaders, ministers, and advisors. And grace them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Grant them deliverance and adorn them in a mantle of victory. Ordain peace in the land and grant its inhabitants eternal happiness. Well, I'm Chris Mitchell. Remember to continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, the release of all the hostages, the safety of Israel's soldiers, and all innocent civilians caught in harm's way. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.